Hello, my name is Paul Rogers. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how Liverpool Football Club have transformed its digital media strategy by daring to think small, and the results we've seen have been pretty big. So it's a story of a 122-year-old English football club, but the lessons we've learned, the mistakes we've made, the solutions we've found, the results we've seen should resonate with anyone here who has a global audience that they want to unlock, or potential viewers, followers, fans, or customers they want to monetize. I joined Liverpool Football Club in 2001. It was the same year that Liverpool and Manchester United both travelled to Asia for the first time to play in pre-season friendlies. That's become something of a biannual ritual for most of the biggest football clubs in Europe now. But back then, all of the talk at Liverpool, and I think at Man United, was about breaking Asia, conquering Asia, or cracking Asia. And the belief was that from men in suits thousands of miles away in Europe, was that if we could unlock the fan base in Asia, then the millions would flow in. Unfortunately, that sort of thinking and that sort of big thinking about tackling a whole continent on its own was never really going to work. It didn't deliver a great result for the clubs, and it didn't really deliver a great result for the fans either. So it's quite incredible, but up until about 2 years ago, Liverpool, who were very popular along with Man United in Asia, still sort of adopted a one-size-fits-all approach to how they delivered content and how they tried to engage with supporters. And as this slide will show you now, in terms of what we were doing, it was all English. So we had an English language website, we had an English language Twitter feed, English language Facebook page. There was no international websites and no international platforms at all, apart from one sort of thing we were doing in China on Sina Weibo. But really, my view, and I was head of content at the time, was that the one-size-fits-all approach was not really fitting many people at all. So what we really needed to do was look at the stats, where we were seeing the traffic, maybe on social media, and also traffic on our website, and determine whether there was a big issue with this sort of approach of tackling everything as one. So when we looked at our website, liverpoolfc.com, which was the most popular football club website in the Premier League at the time, we looked at the traffic, and the traffic, 7 of the top 10 countries delivering traffic were all English-speaking countries. So there was clearly a language barrier. Then when we looked at Facebook, and Facebook's quite easy for someone to like your page, we found that 8 of the top 10 countries weren't English-speaking at all. So when we looked at it and we saw, well, Thailand and Indonesia, where we would consider ourselves to have a massive fan base, they weren't represented at all in terms of traffic coming to our global website. So we started to look at it a bit more and decide, well, why would we have millions of people who don't speak English liking us on Facebook but not visiting our site? And obviously language was a barrier. But Facebook can be a bit deceiving as well. Football clubs and big brands like to boast about how many followers they've got on Facebook and how many friends they've got. But our argument really, when we started to look at it, was there's little point in having 10 million, 20 million or 40 million followers or friends on Facebook if you engage with just 1% of them. So we started to look at what would happen if you did a status update in English. I'm talking back in 2012 when we just delivered content in English. What happens when we do a status update? What are friends for? So you might decide that with a friend you want to invite them to a party. Let's say with a football club we might say, well, we're going to have a big celebration in a bar to celebrate our season. So if we targeted that post in English back in 2012 at 11 million followers, which is what we had at the time, then this is what sort of thing happens. We can basically wipe out 50% of them because the language barrier will mean they don't even understand the update. So they're gone. We can wipe out another section because the time we will have posted our update, lots of people will have been asleep or not online. So a 10 a.m. update in the UK will be 2 a.m. in LA. A 6 p.m. update in Liverpool will be midnight in Bangkok or 3 a.m. in Sydney. So we were losing people that way. Then there's a distance. If we're inviting people to a party in Liverpool and we send that message out to people in Korea or people in Australia or New Zealand or South Africa, then chances are they can't attend. So they're gone as well. Then we can take out cost, because the one-size-fits-all approach to this means that you're basically assuming that everyone has the same amount of revenue to spend. So a fan in England or a fan in Germany or Switzerland may have more money than a fan in Vietnam or Bangladesh, or Vietnam. So they've gone. Then we can take out the sort of cultural differences. So if we're going to invite everyone to come to a bar which is serving alcohol to celebrate something with us, then we have to realise that that won't be suitable for some of our audience, of our 11 million followers. And then there's a sort of lack of engagement, whereas if someone's liked us on Facebook a couple of years ago, and then we've never engaged with them because whether it's through language or time it's been posted, or just the relevance of our updates, then we'll lose them as well. So what you actually see is we start with what looks like 11 million followers or friends on Facebook, and we target our updates at them in English. But really what we're actually hitting is a minuscule amount of people. So we decided that at Liverpool Football Club we need to change something. So the one-size-fits-all approach, we decided we were going to move away from that, and we're going to start actually thinking a bit smaller and hopefully developing local content for a global audience, because we believe that we would achieve bigger results if we did that. So the first thing we did when we started off this program, it started off in November 2012, was to determine which countries were the best countries to target. So we looked at things where, as I showed you previously, where language was a major barrier. So say Indonesia, there's 250 million people live in Indonesia. Liverpool will have a massive fan base there, but the language, English, is not widely spoken. So Indonesia was a country where we'd say, okay, well, if we deliver content in Indonesian, then we're going to be better placed to attract those fans and engage with them. Then we look at commercially across the club, because football clubs at the moment have to deal with the financial fair play rules. So what we generate off the pitch can be invested on the pitch. So we have to look commercially at what we do, and when we do things globally, it's really for two reasons. One is to make the experience better for supporters, but two, it's also to increase our revenue. And our revenue off the pitch will have a direct impact on our success on it. So when we spoke to our partnership team, who were going out and talking to different sponsors and corporate partners about coming on board at the club, Thailand was a big focus for them. Liverpool obviously very popular there. They played there 4 times on pre-season tours. So it was agreed that we would definitely target Thailand in terms of how we engage and deliver content. And then other places where language is not necessarily a barrier. So let's talk about Australia. Definitely the time we were posting content was an issue. America, a huge country where we have lots of fans in lots of different states. So we were looking at how do we try and engage with those fans and sort of bring them together. And then somewhere like India, which is not a traditionally football country, we were looking at it, okay, well, as this is a growing market for us, and obviously cricket is obviously prevalent as a sport, how do we combine things to make it a bit more culturally relevant for our fans in India? So they were the sort of things we were looking at when we were singling out which countries we would then start trying to target. In terms of, we put together a 3-step plan for how we would sort of launch this project. And the first thing was we thought, well, we will go with Twitter, as it was quick to market. Facebook, there's a bigger fan base there that are actually on Facebook at the moment. It takes a bit more resource to do it, and we have to do it in a certain different way to what we do currently. And then if there is a business case for it, then we will launch a website in local language. So picking the right platform, as I mentioned then before, Twitter is quick to market and it's easy to engage with fans in local language. With Facebook, we actually looked at it and we have 11 million fans, or we did at the time. But of these 11 million fans, I think it's probably fair to say that 3/4 of them didn't speak English. So what we tried to do with Facebook was actually segment our Facebook following. So instead of delivering one piece of content to 11 million people, we created different Facebook pages. I think Liverpool were the first football club to do it. I think PSG may be looking at doing this now. But basically, out of those 11 million fans, we basically pulled out the 1 million at the time from Thailand, the 1 million from Indonesia, and then we looked at South America and Spain and decided we'll deliver Spanish content there. Arabic content was obviously delivered to North Africa and the Middle East. And then, but the other thing we have to be careful of is on how platforms can change as well. So when we started in China, we were looking at Sina Weibo as a dominant platform. Since then, WeChat, or WeChat as it's known then, has become, a much more faster growing platform. It's smaller numbers, but it's much higher engagement. In Russia, we went on VK because VK still dominated over Facebook. And then also we were looking at things like what are the trends in those countries. So with Indonesia, for example, although we had 1 million people on Facebook from Indonesia, we were seeing quite low engagement on Facebook from Indonesia and much more a push towards Twitter. And I think obviously the fact that mobile usage is so high in Indonesia definitely played a large role in that. In terms of this was the key thing about what we did. It's about content localization, not translation. I think it's very easy to translate content. Many football clubs have done it. Liverpool have done it in the past. Around about 2001, we launched a Chinese website, which was just a pure translation of our own English language website, and it failed. And I think most football clubs have found that as well, that if you just translate what you put out for an English audience, it will tick a box. It will say that you deliver content in French or Spanish or any number of different languages, but are you actually delivering content that's localized? So that was the key thing that we looked at. So when we talk about content localization, obviously it's not just about translation, it's about delivering content that audience would want in that country. So it's all of our global news which is of interest. So if we were to sign a new player, then everyone in the world wants to know that. But if we have tickets left for a game on a particular night, or if we have one of our legends signing autographs or signing shirts in our local store, then we don't need to deliver that information to people who will never come to the place. So that's what we would sort of look at. I'll give you an example, and you can see 2 pictures there. They're from India. In 2011, November 2011, I actually travelled to Mumbai with Liverpool Football Club. This was before we did any localization of any sort. And we were basically running a program where we took 14 children from Mumbai and gave them professional coaching with Liverpool coaches. And we took over one of our most famous players to actually coach these kids and give them an experience they never would have had before in terms of professional football. Now, of the 14 kids, I'd say 12 came from quite normal backgrounds, but 2 of the children actually lived in one of the biggest slums in Mumbai. So we travelled into the slum in Mumbai, and we met the kids, 2 of the children, one was a girl, one was a boy. And basically, where they lived in basically a tin shack. There was no beds, there was no running water. Their lifestyle was completely alien to anything I'd particularly seen. And those 2 children became the focus of our story. And it was about these 2 kids who basically, struggled to go to school, don't sleep in a bed, live in a tin shack in a slum, could be taken out of that environment and then given professional coaching, which was a chance in a lifetime experience. And I took the pictures and I wrote the story, and it was a very detailed story, and it was received fantastically well. Fans looked at it as in like, what an opportunity these kids are being given by Liverpool Football Club. So all over the world, the response to the story was fantastic, except in India. In India, it was a much different response. Liverpool hadn't engaged at all in India, and that was our first sort of interaction with India. And when I spoke to local people afterwards, they sort of said that there's a feeling in India amongst many people that foreigners look at India as a very poor country, when, yeah, there are massive elements that are poor, but there's other elements that are, incredibly wealthy. So for Liverpool Football Club, they said that when people come to India, they generally take pictures of cows in the street, people living in roads, and the poverty they'll see. And I suppose I fell into that trap a bit because we told that story from a foreigner's viewpoint of how we found India when we went over there. And although it was incredibly positive about what had happened to these 2 kids, the impression was, well, if that's your first engagement and that's how you're going to tell the world about India, then that's not great for us. So, I mean, and we now do quite a lot in India, and I've been told that if we were to do the same story now, it'd be seen fantastically by the Indian people. But it was our first interaction with that country, really, on a global stage, and that's how we presented their country. As you can see now, from where we started, we've completely transformed what we do. So I think we've got 18 international Twitter accounts, 10 international Facebook pages, 3 international websites for Thailand, China and Indonesia. Our next step will be to launch an Arabic website. And we're doing a lot more. So even in China, we've got more platforms. In Russia and in Brazil, we've got different platforms. So we've completely transformed how we engage with fans. But it's not a vanity project. It's not about having numbers to say, well, we deal in more languages than any other club in the world, or we have more Twitter accounts than any other club in the world, or Facebook pages. It's actually for a reason, as I mentioned before. So what we've seen immediately is in Thailand and Indonesia, and I picked those 2 countries because we have launched websites there, we've seen incredible growth in visitor numbers. So going from, they didn't even appear on the top 10 back in November 2012. Now Thailand, we have more visitors from Thailand than anywhere else in the world coming to our international and our website platforms. Indonesia, I think, has gone from 12 to number 2, it hovers between number 2 and number 4. So there's been a huge increase. In terms of website page impressions, that was visitors I was discussing then before. These were the numbers that were coming from Indonesia and Thailand before. And since launching, we've just seen incredible growth. So, and it's not just growth to our Thai and Indonesian platforms, it's actually growth to our main official website, which is English language. So we feel by hooking in fans in local language, then we'll migrate more of them over to our main website. So we've seen incredible results there. On Facebook, as I mentioned, we've segmented the audience. So every club, I think, in England definitely has a global Facebook page. And Liverpool now have a global Facebook page and also local language pages, which form part of it. So it's still, on day one, it would have been 11 million people, but we would have just segmented that 11 million people. Now, I think we've moved up to about 19 million people. I don't know if that slide's updated, but we're on 19 million people. And over half of those 19 million people are now seeing localized content. So what that means is our engagement levels have gone up incredibly. So we've picked a game. When we talk about engagement on Facebook, we're talking about not people liking your page as such. We're talking about someone, if you post a status update, do they like it? Do they share it? Do they comment on it? That's actually engagement, because just chasing numbers of how many page followers you have tells a quite different story. So we picked a game to look at, and when Liverpool played Manchester United earlier this season, we looked at all of the Premier League clubs, all of their interactions on the day that they played that weekend. So, and as I said, about interactions, it's the engagement, so likes, the shares and the comments on your activity that day. So most clubs and most big celebrities around the world would have engagement levels of under 1%. So Arsenal were actually the best performing club apart from Liverpool, and I picked them out. They had 3% engagement, which is actually quite high. But if you start seeing what happens when we actually localise the content and it goes into the pages, then you'll see the numbers just increase. And Thailand is ridiculous. When you talk about Miley Cyrus or any of the big celebrities, Justin Bieber, their engagement will be under 1% for Facebook. So to hit over 100% is absolutely incredible. And it's not just about percentages. This is actually about pure numbers. So if I take Thailand on that day as an example, Liverpool were dealing with 1.7 million people in Thailand who followed that page. So this is earlier this year in 2014. So when we delivered a status update, our maximum reach for that update could be 1.7 million people following the Thai page. Every other club in the Premier League has a global Facebook page, so 19 other Premier League clubs. And if you combine the total amount of followers of those 19 clubs, I think it comes out to about, I can't actually see the slide from it, I think it's about 115 million people. And then that was the engagement we saw on that day. So Thailand, 1.7 million people outperformed the entire Premier League combined, which was quite incredible to see those stats. And we repeated this again for the final game of the season when every club played at the same time. Everyone kicked off in the Premier League at 3 o'clock. And again, Thailand outperformed every Premier League club, including the winners, Manchester City, who have a global Facebook page. So when we look at this, we're looking at Thailand as a local page versus clubs' actual global pages. So So included in that total there will be Manchester United, who have about 40 million followers. So Thailand outperformed not just United, but Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City, and every other club. So, as I mentioned before, it's not a vanity project. It's about actual revenue and experience for supporters. So we found that when we localise content and when we localise campaigns for our partners, we can see as much as a 300% increase in the click-through rate compared to an English campaign on an English website. So it's absolutely working for our partners. In terms of retail, where we've localised content and we've localised platforms, we've seen we've doubled the spend in certain countries in terms of the spend per visitor to our website. So in Australia, which I think is the biggest grower there, we doubled actually how much each fan was spending, and that was much through localised content. So in terms of what we've learned along this journey, I think the number one thing is it's about localization. As I keep mentioning, it's not about translation. It would be easy for us to go to an agency tomorrow and say, well, there's maybe 10 languages in the world that we don't communicate, and just knock us out some platforms and deliver our English content in those languages. That's not what we're trying to do. The second thing we've obviously learned is about, the third thing we've learned is the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. So that definitely doesn't work. And I mean that in terms of your staff that you work with, because we're using people in local markets, and they have a different culture as well to what we do. So if something works in Thailand, it doesn't mean it'll work in Indonesia. So that's definitely a key thing. And then the last thing is that engagement matters the most. It's no point just chasing numbers and saying, well, Liverpool have got 20 million followers. If we're not engaging with any of them, then it's no use. Likewise, if someone else can say, well, we've got 50 million followers, unless you've got true engagement, then it's not much use at all, because there needs to be a relationship between a football club and the fans who follow us around the world. So that's why we've decided that looking at it from a smaller way and looking at countries as opposed to continents, then we're seeing bigger results. That's it. Thank you.
I think it's quite impressive what you have been doing. But in terms of revenue, you showed that there's an increase of spending by certain countries, but I didn't see Indonesia in there or Thailand. I also didn't see in that. But my first question is, why are they not in there? Because they're not spending or not? And my second question is, how much more revenue on a yearly base have you been realizing because of restructuring your digital campaigns?
Okay. Yeah, the revenue for retail didn't show Indonesia and Thailand because we actually have localized retail platforms now in those countries. So that was looking more at our global online store. What I found, and I think this will change, when we first started looking at this, was we have a massive fan base in Southeast Asia in particular. We have a growing fan base in places like America and India, where football is not the dominant sport. So when you have a massive fan base, and maybe in some of these countries where they're developing countries, or the usage of credit cards or online purchasing online is not that prevalent yet, what we found there is that attracts sponsors and partners. So we're realising much more revenue from partners and sponsors in countries where we've got millions of fans, where people have got much more disposable income. So let's say in Australia, in America, in most of Western Europe, then we're seeing direct transactions with fans. So we're actually seeing that we'll generate more revenue directly from fans through retail, through membership products, through online content that's being sold, than we will necessarily from partners in those countries. But in Southeast Asia, we've at least tripled our revenue coming in from sponsors and partners in terms of taking on localized partners. Indonesia as well. We've just done a deal which was announced earlier in the year, but we've got a new training kit partner from Indonesia, Garuda Indonesia. And that's been a large part of bringing them on board, and they'll be our third biggest partner that we've got as a club, so they'll actually sponsor our training kit. That's about a £20 million deal per season, and that's been helped heavily by the fact that we've been able to sort of develop a much stronger relationship with our fan base in Indonesia, and also grow our publicity and our awareness, because that's what basically partners want. But I believe that as online spending becomes more prevalent in developing countries, whether that's in South America, whether that's in Indonesia or China and those countries, that we'll start seeing more direct revenue come from those countries. And as fan base grow, and we've seen massive growth in America with the NBC deal in terms of bringing football and the Premier League out to the masses, as opposed to when it was sort of locked behind a football channel when it was on Fox. As those markets grow and become bigger and bigger, then they'll be more attractive to partners and sponsors as well. So I see the things evening up a bit. Answer your question? Anyone else? Okay. Oh.
I'm just interested to learn about how you would use players' Twitter pages in terms of linking with them, and maybe your promotions that you use through Twitter. How much interaction do you have with the players in terms of using their Facebook pages and Twitter pages to enhance development for your club?
It's a difficult one, really. Where we at Liverpool Football Club, we tend to treat the players' pages as their own. We do have the image rights for certain of our players, so we will work with them to help us as we develop. But for a case of some of our players, I'll give you one example. Lucas Leiva. We spoke to Lucas as a Brazilian player about launching him in China, because we had launched in China on Sina Weibo and Tencent, and we wanted to bring some of our players in there as well. So we agreed with him that we would manage his presence over there, which bringing celebrities onto these platforms is obviously a great thing. So that worked quite well in terms of it enhanced. It was still his profile, but we helped him sort of launch him there. Daniel Sturridge had recently launched in China as well. Some players are more active on social media than others. So Twitter are forever talking to me about, can Steven Gerrard join properly? He's got his foundation on Twitter, but Steven Gerrard's not on Twitter. So it would be nice, I think, if all of our players were on social media. And I think we're seeing the more and more younger players who come through, they're all on it. So lots of our players from our academy, they've grown up in a social media world. Some of our other players who've probably survived most of their career without being on social media have decided that they may not want to go on it. But we've seen great statistics. We'll do player chats on Twitter, on Facebook, so we'll always link to their profiles, and we'll have certain players who might do co-commentary via Twitter on a particular match. So we definitely utilise them where we can, and I think clubs who have seen players come in with massive social media profiles, they've definitely benefited their main account. I know when Manchester United signed Mata, and they announced it via Twitter, they saw a huge increase in terms of followers. So, and that because he brought his own followers to the table. Wayne Rooney is another player who's got a massive following. Lots of Liverpool players are on Twitter. They're not all as active as maybe they could be. I'd argue maybe the manager is quite happy for it to be that way, but they're certainly on it.
I had a question about on Facebook for localization. I know that they allow you to actually localize your message. So did you choose? Could you just tell us about how you choose to do separate page as opposed to using that option to localize message?
Yeah, definitely. So just to clear that one up, so we've been using Facebook since probably about 2009 as a football club. And if we wanted to target a post, we can do. And to be honest, I did one last night for our fans in Turkey, because there's been a big incident over in Turkey. So that's quite easy. We'll put it up in local. We'll put it in local language status update. Then we'll target that update at the country or the language we want it to go to. So that's fine. But that can't happen all the time. And also it means that while they'll get that update, they'll also get all of the other English updates that we were doing. So we looked at it first with Thailand. We said, well, okay, well, we're getting no engagement really from Thailand because we're putting up status updates in English. And also the way that different countries use Facebook. So we decided, okay, so what we'll do is we'll go through Facebook and we'll create a localized page. So it's still part of our 11 million at that time. You know, it's on 19 now, but I think we had 800,000 Thai fans. So we said, okay, if you live in Thailand, you'll now automatically see the Thai version of our page. You don't have to go and like we weren't creating a new page. We were basically just creating a Thai version of our page. So they didn't have to do anything else. What they would suddenly start seeing is updates coming through in Thai. So the engagement obviously increases, and when the engagement increases, then more people see our posts. Because I'll talk from my own perspective. I've probably got, I don't know, maybe 150, 200 friends on Facebook. And the updates I always see in my timeline are the same people. They will have been the people I will have liked their photo, or I've seen them lately. And all of the people I used to work with, or some of the people I went to school with, I never see their updates. So they're friends, but I never see them, and that's because I haven't engaged them for so long. So as soon as we started delivering content in Thai, we would have more people engage with us because the content was actually localized. And then more people would see it. So if their friend commented on something, then their friend sees it, and we just saw incredible growth in terms of the engagement. So that's what we did. That's what we did with Thailand. With South America, we looked at it and we weren't getting much engagement again from sort of a Spanish-speaking sort of audience. So we took Spain and we took South America and we picked those countries and we grouped them together. So there will be minor differences between some of the languages in terms of some of the different versions of Spanish. But again, it's been a success for us. So that's really worked very well. And I think sort of I'm quite surprised that other clubs haven't really gone down that route. And the other thing we were doing at different times was it could be a religious festival. It could be it's Ramadan. And we can deliver content that everyone else doesn't have to see. Because in England, you've got a situation where we're an English football club with an English fan base as well as a global fan base. And sometimes there can be tensions between English fans and fans coming from around the world who maybe want to come to the match, and then tickets it's even more scarce to come to. So we want to engage with fans all over the world. We want to welcome fans all over the world, but maybe we don't have to tell a fan. So I'll give you an example. When Sachin Tendulkar retired from Indian cricket, and it was the biggest story in India for a month, we could deliver a message from Liverpool Football Club just praising him on his career. Now, no one else in the world needs to see that, and they didn't really see it because we basically delivered it to our Indian fan base. So that definitely is a good thing you can do. So it's not just about the content, it's also about what is the message you're giving. And we can, if there is a religious festival in India, then we can wish people Happy Diwali or whatever we choose to do. And we don't have to give that because it's not really relevant to most other people. And the other key thing I'd say about our use of Facebook in terms of localization is that in Thailand, their use of Facebook is completely different to us. It's not even just about the language or about the localization of the content. They are quite happy to have 20 updates in a day, or they might have 15 updates in a day, where we'll probably deliver 4 or 5 at most, I think, on our global one, which goes out mostly to England and lots of English-speaking countries. Because I think anything more than that is almost seen as bombardment, whereas in Thailand, you can't actually post enough for them to have, instead of creating a photo album, you would actually post a picture up, and then you might post another picture up. There's a very different way of working. So if you're just talking about translating your content, then you would only be translating 3 or 4 updates, a day in Thailand, whereas there's an appetite for much more content. It's almost like, how much stuff can we give them? And also, in some countries, it's about celebrity focus. So it's more about our bigger players than maybe, say, our reserve players or the hard-working players who probably don't get much of the credit. And I think we'll definitely go with celebrity focus in certain countries. So it's definitely about tailoring the approach, and we've tried to do that through Facebook. Okay. Thank you very much for listening.